Us down then. 3, 2, 1. Hello, Champ Ensminger. Nice to meet you and welcome to the Ponytail Show.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me.
For folks out there, Champ directed a beautiful short documentary called Yainin, and I saw it. I think you sent me a little DM by Instagram, and I just resonated with it straight away because it's about. I think it's about a family relationship across on two sides of the world. It's about a badass grandmother who's running who I think I read in a press release or something, you called her a sausage tycoon, which was really hilarious to me. But yeah, she runs a Nam factory, which for folks who don't know what Nam is, it's a delicious northern Thai sausage, fermented sausage. And yeah, Champ, tell us about the documentary. Give us the spiel on the doco, and then I would like to go into why and the how and the what and all that. So take it away, Champ.
Sure. Thank you. The documentary was made last year. It's 13 minutes long, so it's a short. It was filmed in Chiang Mai, where my mother's side of the family is from, and also where I was born. I myself am based in Seattle, Washington at the moment. I'm an editor, and this is very much a personal project. I, as my day job, do a lot of commercial work, sometimes and occasionally fun music video or documentary short projects, things like that. Mostly branded content because a lot of that is happening here in Seattle. And I got really inspired from a lot of different people and contexts as to my closeness to my mom's culture and specifically being from Chiang Mai to feature my grandmother. We had a really great festival run this past year.
Nice.
It was a bit bittersweet since current circumstances made most of the festivals virtual. But it's also just been a really great chance to meet a lot of, especially Asian American filmmakers who are kind of doing the same thing, having personal, passion projects and showing them at Asian American specific festivals, and kind of meeting people in that way. And from what I've gotten from the experience screening it at different places, that it really resonates across the different spectrums of Asian American identity, because there's always a strong thread of a matriarch or a motherly figure, either an auntie or a grandmother, who is kind of the fulcrum of a lot of Asian and Asian diasporic families. And my grandmother is just her own funny character, and my experience just kind of being around her as a kid, with her being my grandmother, and then as an adult when I lived in Chiang Mai in 2013 for almost 2 years, and just spent a lot of time around her, and she would talk my ear off. We would go to a different temple in Chiang Mai every weekend with her driver, and it's not so much supposed to be a sweeping documentary about this woman. It's mainly kind of trapping in a bottle the feeling of visiting your grandmother, and around that feeling, it's a very specific kind of moment in time that happens for me personally, living in the States but visiting family in Thailand, and how older folks, they kind of just, especially Chiang Mai feels like an old city already, but you go to grandma's house and it's just a time capsule. It's just a moment in time that's always been there. And I have very, affectionate associations with that. And I guess we'll go into it some more, I'm sure. But
you really do get that feeling of affection and yeah, for sure, love from the way that you shot the short film. I feel like I want to ask you actually, was this your first project being director?
I've my day job tries to throw me a bone every now and then if someone, if because I've expressed interest in wanting to do more directing. But yeah, I think through their encouragement too, they were like, "Yeah, you should definitely own this and be the kind of all around director for it." And yeah, I think it's definitely my first festival run, so that's been really exciting.
Like the thing about short films that is so striking is that you have to really communicate intention in a very short span of time. And I feel like the editing, like every second that's involved in the film is so crucial because you're communicating so much or in such a short space of time. Like how, like I guess let's go back and start with, what motivated you to, work, like to work on this passion project, and where did the ideas and passion come from?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very close story, just because it's especially about the grandparent that I'm closest to. Like I have, I would say for me, 3 sets of grandparents, and it was really affecting, especially to do this project about my Thai grandmother, because her husband, my grandfather, passed away when I was in high school, and we've got a big contingent of family here in the States. I grew up in Spokane, Washington. It's like very kind of like suburban America, and I think
I've actually interviewed someone from Spokane, a leather worker by the name of Ben, and yeah, it looks like a stunning place to live though. Like the landscape seems incredible.
Yeah, it's beautiful outdoor spaces, and yeah, I mean, it's very nice. It's small. For me personally, growing up, it didn't feel very diverse, and I think I've kind of expanded and reached out to other people and places since then. But it's a nice place to grow up for sure.
Yeah. I think definitely this part of the conversation is something I want to actually dive into because, there's a lot of significance. We're diverging from what you were talking about before, but I think there's a lot of impact. Your film has a lot of impact, especially right now, because, the Asian American identity is something that really needs to be explored more and talked about more and shared more, like especially in this day and age where we are going through, unfortunately, a lot of Asian hate in the States and in other Western countries. But I think maybe something you and I, even though we don't know each other very well at all, we just met today, maybe there is some overlap in terms of growing up in places that are not very diverse and being somebody who identifies himself as being mixed race, and the challenges that brings growing up. It's finding identity. It's like the idea of finding identity is something that maybe a lot of mixed race people can relate to, in terms of just going through their life making art and exploring their roots and figuring out where they fit in, or where they can find somewhere that feels like home. And I think definitely through this project I can see that it's kind of opened doors for you that have put you in touch with a lot of other people who are on a similar pathway. And that, like, definitely I felt that through the film, just the 13 minutes but let's go back to, where you found inspiration for the documentary. Did you write the script yourself I mean, not script, but the storyline or however you do when you make a documentary.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a unique project in that it was officially a documentary, but I almost wanted to treat it like a short film / maybe even a music video, in that we wanted to have a plan as far as what my grandmother's arc was, kind of like the story that we're kind of taking you through with her, because we wanted to be very economical with the time that we had in Chiang Mai with the camera crew and everything. I was really lucky to...
Did you shoot that in 3 days? I read on your press release. You shot in 3 days. Holy crap.
Yeah, it was really long 3 days, and most of it was spent, during early morning or late afternoon. But my grandmother rallied. I kind of just wheeled her around town, but she pulled through. I definitely, for someone who studied a little bit about documentary filmmaking in school and then doing some of it, leading up to this project, I definitely believe that some of the best documentary filmmaking is from people who really dug deep into their subject and, did a lot of the research long before the subject was on camera. So a lot of pre-interviews, and it's it was a very much a family affair. So my mom helped out a lot in interviewing her mother, and just kind of getting a sense of what we want to capture before we got there. If there was any subjects that were, off limits or that she would feel sensitive about, and then just planning that out. We know we want to feature her at her hair salon. Like, I wanted that to be a very distinct introduction to her, because it's just fun, and that's
so
where
important for all the aunties, like the Thai aunties and the Thai grandmas out there doing your hair, having that perfect, perm is so important every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And we weren't going to shoot anything unless that was like checked off first.
Hell
yeah. So we definitely had it pretty planned out before we showed up in Chiang Mai, because I knew it was going to be a really fast 3 days.
Yeah. Like, so I guess, like, I want to know, like, have you been... Did you want to do this project for a really long time? Has it been something that you intended to do, for years, or was it something that you just kind of spontaneously came up with and just like pulled resources together to get, to do?
Yeah, I think it was a mix of both feeling really confident in doing something personal in the work setting I was in. Like I said, a lot of I work around a lot of really badass like animators and directors that do a lot of work here in kind of the video industry in Seattle, and I've been an editor for the past 5 years, so I feel like I knew the steps that it needed to look and feel the way that I wanted. But it was also something that it took the time, thinking about it in different ways long before for it to actually happen, because I wouldn't have had the connections to video production that I had I not lived in Chiang Mai for a time, met some people in Bangkok who did some commercial work, and our DP, he's an expat from Canada who is based in kind of between Taiwan and Bangkok. But Liam Morgan, he does a lot of commercial work, and he really fell in love with the treatment that I made. It's like the document that kind of gives the look and feel for the project, and he said, "Oh yeah, I would love to come to Chiang Mai, because the food is great, and my crew and I will have a blast, and B, because it felt like a really sincere project." So I really lucked out in that way.
Yeah. Well, from the film, I kind of put together that your mom and her siblings grew up in the States, and you were born in Chiang Mai, but you also grew up in the States. Let's talk about that, because, as a half Thai person growing up in the States, there can be a lot of disjoint in terms of culture and language and just a lot of things. Like, did you grow up speaking Thai at home? Was the Thai culture quite influential on your upbringing, or were you kind of like, quite Americanized and, retraced your roots back when you moved to Chiang Mai in 2013?
Yeah, it was a process over the course of my life of 30 plus years that I grew up very American. Mom and her siblings who moved to the States. She had two other siblings that moved with her and then one who stayed behind. So we have cousins that are much more Thai in that sense than we are. But they kind of established themselves by having restaurants in Spokane, kind of monopolizing the Thai food scene in Spokane, Washington. And we all grew up restaurant kids. So I think that helped that was that we had a lot of family reinforcement of that culture. That Kamung was spoken very loudly all the time in our house. We got Thai TV. Mom would follow Lakan Thai, like all the shows. And
Lakan Thai, for those listening, are like Thai soap operas. Very important feature of Thai contemporary culture. Big time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like we got very lucky that was always really present at home. Being at American schools, there's constant like you trying to be Americanized for yourself to fit in, and sometimes being tokenized because you're just the Asian kid in one particular class. And then by that, it's just they would be half right. As mixed race, it's like there's all kinds of conversations that and dialogues confusing. That you're having.
Yeah, for sure. And when you came back to Thailand in 2013, like, what was that like? Did you feel like kind of an outsider? Did it take a little bit of adjusting? Or, what was that about? Could you speak, like, pretty decent Thai already? Like, having grown up the way you did?
I think it was mainly that I could receive a lot of Thai and be able to translate it internally in my head, but projecting it has taken years of confidence, and the years spent in Chiang Mai definitely helped, meeting Thai friends and just getting back into the swing of it. And my relation to Thai language and my skill is kind of relies on my proximity to Chiang Mai, especially.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I moved back to Thailand in 2011 or something, and I had zero Thai. I came from Australia. I had like zero Thai. I did like a 10-week short course, like one lesson a week before I left to come to Thailand. And, you do the basics of Thai, but it's really like barely anything. So I came to Thailand feeling like such an outsider, like, especially with the language barrier and everything. But there was something that I grew up in Thailand up to the age of 8. So there was like enough, but you kind of forget it when you live in a very westernized environment where you feel like you do need to blend in or be made to feel like an outsider as well, being someone who, like, not just by looks, but just culturally inside, you might behave in different ways to other people in a Western environment, or you might enjoy different foods, or you might just see the world in a different way than other people. But I felt the same kind of distance moving back to Thailand as well, because your experience has been fragmented, like from a child to being an adult. Language barriers. There's a lot of catching up to do as well, which I feel is part of the fun, especially as a creative person too. There's like a joy of discovery and an excitement that happens when you're forced in a uncomfortable situation where you have to learn and like experience and connect with people in a way that you are not comfortable with, which is for some people super daunting. For most people, I'm sure, super daunting, but it's kind of fun too because you're pushing yourself in many different ways. Actually, that brings me to a topic that I love talking about with creative people, is like this idea of being uncomfortable. And do you feel like creativity, the idea of pushing yourself into the unknown, is an essential part of the creative process for you?
Oh, yeah.
Heavy,
I think,
man.
yeah. Yeah. Oh man, pushing into the unknown for a field like video and film production that gives some leeway for risk taking, but especially if there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, you're trying not to deviate.
Especially if you've crowdfunded your project, which you
Right.
did.
Yeah,
Right?
which I'm really grateful for, and but yeah, and so there is a little bit of pressure, and especially, I mean, on top of trying to make sure that a film production goes well with a lot of people involved, for this kind of thing, especially as someone mixed race, there was a lot of like personal like expectation to portray authenticity. Which I, again, relied on family and the crew who were already familiar with the language as well, and with Thai culture in general, that we could dial it into something that feels personal to me, but also, you know, feels like it could have come from like a purely Thai context, if that makes sense.
Do you struggle with imposter syndrome also? I
Yeah.
totally do. It's something that I feel like creatively and just, culturally, being mixed race, you are kind of standing on your one foot is on either side of, a world. And feeling this need to feel authentic in both worlds is like a really hard thing to juggle. But do you feel that way too? I mean, you had that struggle with making the film too.
Yeah, I tried not to. I tried to kind of just power through a lot of that doubt by way of just interpreting my role as someone capturing my family, but also trying to be a very a documentary filmmaker at a distance who can kind of be transparent and let the subjects portray themselves in their most authentic way, and just trying to approach my grandmother as any woman. It's amazing how many festivals ask me like, so how did you meet this woman? How did you find? Because they don't associate
they
me
don't
with
understand the language either, because there is something that I did pick up on, which is very difficult to do, is translation. Everyone has a different interpretation of what something means in another language. So it would be very different being a non-Thai person watching this film. The experience would be so different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was hoping the entire time while translating it, and Mom throughout the process was very confident in that I was getting it pretty close, and I was trying to give Kunyai inflections in English that were in the spirit of the thing that she was saying, even if it wasn't 100% the right translation. I mean, as close as possible.
I definitely felt that. Yeah, for sure. And just like a lot of things, it's very subjective how to translate something. It's more about, again, the intention behind something than the actual literal, words, the words being communicated.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So sorry, back to the interviews from different film festivals. What were people mainly asking you? Thinking that your grandmother was like a complete stranger.
Yeah, it's hilarious how there's the what names can do. Like they see my name directed by Champ Ensminger, and they're like, "Wow, this guy really kind of dug deep into Thai culture." And I was like, "Well, funny you should mention that. It's kind of in my back pocket that I'm a member of the family." So
yeah,
which I feel like is a. I take it as a compliment because I feel like I want to kind of remove myself as much as possible. I mean, knowing that it is family and it's from my lived experience of this woman, but I wanted to be as removed from it as possible and for it to kind of speak for itself. And I think that's where a lot of my confidence came in, that kind of smoothed out the frustration or like the anxiety of like trying to be authentic, is that as far as being a mixed race person and an artist or creative, you are functioning as a translator, and you're kind of a conduit for someone else to be able to show their lived experience and to translate that to other people that would have never experienced that for themselves.
Absolutely. I think that's, the case with any good writing, any good piece of communication in that way, is assuming that the audience or reader has no idea about what you're talking about as well. Being able to communicate something to a broad, like very diverse range of people is something very hard to do. But I think that personal connection that you definitely sense when you see the film definitely makes it relatable to a range of people, because it's to do with family as well. Although some people thought that you were documenting a total stranger, but there's still the subject was about family. Yai talks about family throughout the whole documentary. She calls, for those who haven't seen the film yet, she calls the staff at her factory, basically her family as well. The people in the factory call her mom, which is like a very key part of this sense of closeness that you feel from about the relationship she has with the people who make her Nam sausages, and and then we also go into her relationship with her family, how she's built the business for her family, and who live on the other side of the world, which is very beautiful as well. Let's talk about, do you identify as Thai, and where would you feel is home to you?
I think by way of just always having, growing up an American kid for the most part, but always having my Thai-ness as like a secret superpower that I don't really express, and I didn't really express until I was older. It's been, a rediscovery of that, and I have definitely identified as I've grown older as being more Thai, and specifically someone from Chiang Mai, and just kind of the way that the definition of Thai-ness from northern Thailand. That resonates a lot with food in the family. Mom, makes all the great dishes from northern Thailand, and my uncle would cook that.
What does she make the best? What's her thing?
She makes all kinds of great lab. My stepdad asks for lab, pretty often. But I grew up eating just kai jiao and sticky rice. Like that. Yeah.
We got to explain for people who are not Thai and listening. Okay, lab is a northeastern Thai, but also northern Thai dish, because we have lab kua, which is my favorite kind of lab, which is beef lab with blood and innards, kind of blanched and then tossed in classic Thai spices and herbs and sauces. And then you have the northeastern version, which is more popular. That's could be a range of any kind of meat, duck, pork, chicken, kind of blanched, and then also tossed in roasted pounded rice, fish sauce, lime juice, mint, red onion, a bunch of delicious things.
Amazing.
Yeah, and kai jiu is what every single Thai kid eats growing up. It's Thai omelette, and like everyone either has that with rice, or in your case, you had it with sticky rice. Delicious.
Yeah. Yeah. No frills, just like salty, fills you up. It's awesome. Yeah, and I think I wish that I had gotten more adventurous the way that my mom is with spice and other dishes, but it didn't come around until I lived in New York for a chunk of time, and I worked at a restaurant called Pok Pok that's based in Portland.
Yep.
And I was there for 2.5 years and really kind of, and there's a whole conversation about authenticity with Thai food in America. And knowing that, though, I felt like I was in a space that was holding a lot of these recipes to high esteem. Shout out to Andy Ricker. I know that P. Andy is living in Chiang Mai now, but and then I'd take my mom to a place like Pok Pok, and she would be the one to say, like, this is pretty legit. Like there are ingredients in this dish that Thai people can't get, but they're doing it more authentically because they're incorporating that. So
I'd love to dive into this actually, because to me, authenticity in terms of communicating a culture is so important, and that always gets watered down in Western contexts, because especially, for example, with Thai food in America is shocking. A lot of Thai food in Western countries is shocking. Okay, maybe you can't get the right ingredients, but it's usually watered down to suit Western tastes. It's like a lot of sugar is added, a lot of like the spices toned down, and then therefore and then a lot of the time, similar sauces are used for things that shouldn't be tasting similar to other things. So you end up with like some very bland, watered down food, which like is a complete, that's a huge conversation in itself, because it's like I don't want to put words, but strong words into this, but yeah, it's almost like the colonialization of food, because there is this sense that the authentic version is not good enough, or is not, suited to a specific culture, when I think authenticity is so important, and the roots of something, communicating the roots of a culture, is more important than catering to the the taste of the local area. But I think there is always that battle when you are running a business, and when costs are so high, and you're juggling so many things, that these like very authentic details get lost in translation. I think that is the case with foods from many different cultures, but it's something that I feel very strongly about.
Yeah, it's a contentious subject for sure. And I mean, it's constantly in conversation. I still have friends who work in the restaurant industry, and it's, and Thai communities as well. Like, just what is the authentic, especially, just, are you going to get to the same level that is expected in the native country when you can't get a lot of, these different vegetables and things like that? Like, what is your replacements? What shortcuts are you making? And it's tough.
Yeah.
All the more reason that, I felt like it was a treat to tell people about NAM with this project.
Let's talk about NAM, actually. Can you tell people about what NAM is? And yeah, I'm sure you know way more about NAM than I do, because your grandma has a NAM factory. And it actually, I looked it up. It's like your grandmother's NAM is like famous in Thailand. It's really like popular.
Right. The sausage tycoon label wasn't given by me. It's from people who would meet my grandmother and be like, she is legit. Like, this is real. This is, nem is, in its purest form, is fermented pork sausage, often fermented with sticky rice, and it's usually served pretty fresh. It's not cooked, so it needs to kind of it doesn't have a long shelf life. It can be used in other dishes to kind of give us its sour profile to like a fried rice, like a nem khao tod is like fried rice with chunks of nem in it, which I enjoy a lot.
Delicious.
Or you eat it straight with like green chilies and big chunks of garlic, things like that. Just kind of like nibble at. Yeah, so my grandmother is known for nem, but over recent years she's done mu yao, which is a cooked form of sausage that you see in half moon shapes that kids also love. And I think it's more like nem. I may be wrong, but I felt like nem for a certain generation was very present and now has since become kind of an acquired taste. But yeah, I mean, there's still a market, especially in Chiang Mai and kind of the region, Mae Sot, the border with Burma. There's still a lot of people who love her brand, especially.
I think definitely from my perspective, the globalization of the world has changed the Thai tastes here in Thailand. And a lot of Thai young people are not eating like these old, I don't even think they're acquired taste. Nam is delicious, but there are a lot of very picky eaters nowadays because people are growing up with KFC, fried chicken, and like very industrialized food. And their relationship to food has changed. I've definitely noticed that. A lot of kids not eating their greens. You know, the wonderful thing about Thai food is how wild the food is actually and how seasonal things are, especially in your like nam pik and som tams. These are like chili pastes eaten with different vegetables. A lot of the times it depends on the time of year as to what kind of vegetables you're eating things with. And a lot of things, especially in Isan culture in the east of Thailand, is wild food, you know, mushrooms picked from the forest, different, you know, beautiful, like, or in the south, you know, things, you know, like vegetables that are just growing everywhere. There is an abundance of ingredients everywhere. And unfortunately, yeah, the new generation is like becoming more and more picky, because maybe I'm just mainly talking about Bangkok kids, like big city kids, but yeah, it has a really big impact on the way we will move forward with culture. And yeah, I really hope that you know, producers like your grandmother and her business continue to thrive as we are going through, as we enter a more globalized world, for sure. Mu ya also is like something I really love, but it's also, I guess, can be used in Vietnamese cuisine as well. Which is like a big essential part in Vietnamese food as well, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's another reason why I love identifying as someone from Chiang Mai or associates with Thai culture, specifically with Chiang Mai, is because it feels like a gateway to not necessarily, it's like all these cultures that have kind of come up together. You know, my mom or my grandmother's, one of her parents is Burmese, and then her other parent is Lao. And so you have a lot of those conversations of what I experienced living in Chiang Mai is how close a kinship there is in food, especially, and in language, in Khmer and Lao languages, to be able to use them as kind of intermediary, you know, languages to speak to each other, which, you know, I don't know how many people in Bangkok, A, understand Khmer, and B, can use that to speak to people from Laos. So
I doubt. Yeah. For non-Thais who are listening, I guess Chiang Mai is geographically positioned like you're at the very northern tip of Thailand, and you have to the north and to the northwest you have Burma, and you have the Mekong River that makes a borderline between Thailand, Burma, and on the eastern side you have Laos. So there is like a place called the Golden Triangle, and that is where the river splits into three and divides the three pieces of land and three countries. But that's closer to Chiang Rai, but it's also in the north of Thailand, which is very close to Chiang Mai. So like a lot of dishes in Chiang Mai food, like cuisine, is heavily influenced by Burmese food and Laotian food, and obviously the language as well. One of my favorite dishes, Chiang Mai dish, like northern dishes, would be kanom jin nam niao, which is like rice noodles with like this sauce that kind of tastes like spaghetti bolognese, if I can describe it to people who are not Thai. But it's got pork and tomato and coagulated blood and veggies. But I found out that actually comes from the Shan people in Burma, which is an indigenous peoples from Burma. They are a nomadic peoples. So that's why they cross borders. And the nam niao, the niao part of the dish, the namesake of the dish, comes from a special flower from a tree that grows specific to that area of the world, which is also very beautiful and delicious too. Do you have a favorite northern dish that you discovered, like going back to live over there?
Yeah, I mean, we did a version of saitwa, the saitwa platter at Pok Pok that I really loved in general. Nam pik num and the green chili sauce that kind of centers around the whole dish, and you've got all these other little nibbles like pork rinds and green beans and pickled cabbage. And I was like, I always loved ordering that as my staff meal, and but I was like, what is this like, in kind of the epicenter in Chiang Mai? And then when I moved and found it, in all these places, Saitwa, oh man, it's the best.
So it's also sausage, but it's grilled, it's cooked, and it's like a pork sausage that has a lot of herbs. I don't want to lead people down the wrong path because I can't name exactly what herbs. I feel like there's definitely ginger and maybe kaffir lime and like there's definitely kaffir lime in there, and like chili and garlic and a bunch of delicious herbs in the actual sausage meat. And that's grilled, and you have it with toasted peanuts and chunks of ginger, whole chilies, red shallots, and it's so delicious. You find it like people grilling it on the side of the road just for like just a casual snack, afternoon snacks. Yeah, so good. So like, was the sai ua in Chiang Mai kind of like did you find like different versions of what you had in the States?
Yeah, it was a gradient. Like Pok Pok had done its homework kind of to get the bare basics, but obviously, the spread consists of very fresh veggies or things that were in season that just really make it a lot more alive of a dish. Yeah, I mean, it it tastes so like preserved. I think there's components when you get a dish like that. They're trying to do an authentic Thai dish in Brooklyn, that some things just feel a little bit canned. But when you see it out in the wild, in Chiang Mai, it's just a whole other thing.
The freshness is there.
Yeah.
So, like, I know that you've just kind of released the documentary out into the big bad world of the internet. What happens from here for you?
Oh boy, I love this question, as you can tell, but
We're diving into the big bad unknown,
yeah, I
the
mean,
theme of now.
yeah, adaptation, translation. Yeah, I've been really grateful for having this festival run and then releasing the film finally as kind of a thing that I did during quarantine, and aside from just being able to work in the industry that I've kind of been stubborn enough to stick around in for the longest time, I feel like maybe 10 years working in video production. I am
that's
excited.
what it takes.
It is, yeah, just to kind of keep at
Putting it in, yeah.
I do want to follow through with a lot of these Asian American filmmakers, who I consider colleagues. Almost like this past festival run is almost like you're meeting a cohort of folks that are studying at the same time and then finalizing or finishing all of their final projects and sharing that to each other. And it's just been a treat to kind of meet other people, especially Thai people. There's Thai American filmmakers just kind of in these little parts of the world that I'm just like, yes, this is, we feel seen like all at once. Yeah.
Thai film is so exciting, especially in the more indie film, in indie film and also in like more commercial film. I feel like Thai film is definitely it has a very unique perspective, and I mean, one of my favorite things in the world is Thai comedy. Thai comedy is the best thing ever. Thai people are so funny. But yeah, like that's exciting for sure. Like for folks out there who want to check out their film, check out your work, how can they do that?
Yeah, the film you can watch in its entirety at yinindoc.com. And you can also support us. There's a Yinin shop with a really awesome poster for the film that was designed.
Sick. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Loved it.
It was designed by a Korean artist named Do-hee Kwon, who goes by Kimchi Superpower. She's based in Cheongdo. And then some other fun things, some postcards and things like that. And I would love for more people to check out the film.
Sick, dude. Well, I really enjoyed it. I've watched it multiple times already. And yeah, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.